Am I the a-hole for leaving my husband at the hospital after he refused to be in the delivery room with me? This happened 2 months ago, but it's still causing major friction in my family, so I need some outside opinions. I, 29F, and my husband Jake, 32M, have been together for 6 years and married for 3. We were both ecstatic when we found out we were expecting our first child. Pregnancy was tough for me, though. I had severe morning sickness and gestational diabetes and was generally miserable. But Jake was supportive and sweet the whole way through, which made it bearable. As we approached my due date, we discussed birth plans. I was adamant that I wanted Jake in the delivery room. I needed his support, and he'd always agreed. However, a few weeks before my due date, Jake started acting strange. He was distant and distracted and wouldn't engage in any baby-related discussions. I thought he was just anxious about becoming a dad, so I didn't press him too much. The day I went into labor, Jake drove me to the hospital but seemed off. He was quiet and kept checking his phone. When we got there, he pulled the nurse aside and spoke to her privately. She came back and told me Jake wouldn't be in the delivery room because he was uncomfortable with blood and medical procedures. I was stunned. He'd never mentioned this before. I begged him to stay and told him I needed him, but he just kept saying, "I can't do this." I was heartbroken and furious, but I didn't have much time to dwell on it as my contractions were getting stronger. Jake said he'd be in the waiting room and kissed me on the forehead before leaving. I was left alone, crying and feeling utterly abandoned. Labor was long, painful, and traumatic. I was alone the entire time except for the medical staff. When our son was finally born, I was exhausted, emotionally and physically. The nurse handed me my son, and all I felt was a deep sadness that Jake wasn't there to share this moment. After I was taken to a recovery room, I asked the nurse to get Jake. She came back and said he'd left the hospital hours ago. I couldn't believe it. I called him repeatedly, but he didn't answer. Finally, I sent him a text saying I was done and he could find his own way home. I didn't see him until the next day. He showed up at the hospital with flowers and an apology, saying he panicked and needed some air. He claimed he'd gone home to shower and change and fell asleep, which I didn't buy for a second. I told him I didn't believe him. I was overwhelmed with anger and hurt, and I told him he had let me down in the worst possible way. He kept apologizing, saying he knew he'd messed up and he'd do anything to make it right. I didn't want him near me or our son at that moment, so I asked him to leave. He tried to protest, but I told him I needed time to process everything. He left, and I spent the rest of my hospital stay alone with my baby, trying to grapple with the enormity of what had happened. Since then, Jake has been trying to make amends. He's been taking parenting classes and attending therapy, and is constantly trying to be present and supportive. But I can't shake the feeling of betrayal. He abandoned me at one of the most vulnerable moments of my life. Every time I look at him, I remember being alone in that delivery room, terrified and in pain, wondering why the person who promised to be by my side wasn't there. My family is split. Some think I'm being too hard on Jake, that he made a mistake and is clearly remorseful. They say he's a good father and partner otherwise, and I should focus on moving forward for the sake of our child. Others think what he did was unforgivable and I should leave him. They believe I'll never truly trust him again, and that's no foundation for a marriage. I'm torn. I do still love him, and I know he loves me and our son, but part of me wonders if I'll ever get over this. Was it just a moment of weakness on his part, or a sign of something deeper that I can't overlook? So, am I the a-hole for leaving him at the hospital and now considering leaving him for good? Next story. Am I the a-hole for blowing up at my girlfriend after therapy backfired? Advice needed. My 28M girlfriend Emma, 27F, and I have been together for 6 years. For most of that time, we've been happy, like really happy. The kind of relationship people say just works, you know? We were always on the same page, rarely fought, and genuinely enjoyed each other's company. But over the past year, things started to feel different. Small arguments here and there, more miscommunication, and just this weird sense that we weren't as in sync as we used to be. It wasn't anything major, just the usual wear and tear stuff, or so I thought. Emma, however, seemed to be more concerned. She started pointing out issues I wasn't even aware of, like how I supposedly wasn't listening enough, or wasn't as emotionally available as I used to be. I admit I've been busy with work, but I thought we were doing okay. Still, I didn't want to dismiss her feelings. Then about 6 months ago, she suggested we go to couples therapy. Now, I've always been a bit skeptical about therapy unless things are really bad, but I agreed because I figured it couldn't hurt. She said she found a great therapist through a friend, and we should give it a try. I wasn't familiar with this Lily, but Emma was excited about it. So we booked our first session. At first, the session seemed fine. Lily asked good questions, got us to open up, and gave us some tools to communicate better. I felt like I was doing my best to listen and improve, but something about it felt a little off. Every time we talked about any issue, it seemed like Lily was always subtly siding with Emma. If I mentioned being stressed from work, she'd steer the conversation towards how I wasn't giving enough attention to Emma. If I brought up a disagreement, somehow it became about my communication issues. After a few weeks, Emma started using phrases like, "Lily thinks you should try this," or "Lily says you need to work on that." It felt like everything I did was being scrutinized and dissected by this woman I barely knew. I didn't want to be paranoid, but it seemed like Lily was slowly convincing Emma that I was the problem in the relationship, and every time I tried to voice my concerns, they were brushed aside. I tried to push through it, thinking maybe I was just being defensive, but it didn't stop. Every session has the same dynamic. It was like Lily was planting seeds of doubt in Emma's head, and Emma was running with them. I even started to wonder if maybe I was the problem. Was I actually this bad of a partner? Things reached a boiling point a couple of weeks ago. During a session, Lily started suggesting that maybe we should consider a break, so I could work on myself more. That felt like a slap in the face. I'd been trying so hard to be better, and now she was suggesting we split up. I looked at Emma, waiting for her to disagree or defend me, but she just sat there, quietly nodding along. After that session, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I blew up at Emma when we got home. I told her I didn't trust Lily's judgment, that it felt like she was just feeding Emma reasons to blame me for everything wrong in the relationship. Emma got defensive, saying I was overreacting, and that Lily was just trying to help us work through our issues. We didn't talk for a few days, and I started feeling guilty for snapping. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe therapy was exposing some flaws I needed to work on. But then, something happened that blew everything wide open. Last week, we went to a mutual friend's party. While there, I overheard Emma and her friend Sarah talking in the corner, giggling about something. I caught just a bit of their conversation. "I can't believe you pulled it off for this long. Poor guy still thinks she's an actual therapist." I immediately confronted them, and that's when Emma's face turned pale. Sarah quickly tried to backtrack, but the truth spilled out. Turns out, Lily isn't a licensed therapist at all. She's one of Emma's close friends from college who thought it'd be fun to help Emma fix me by posing as a therapist. Emma had set this whole thing up because she thought I wouldn't agree to therapy otherwise. They figured that with Lily playing the part, they could guide me into becoming a better boyfriend without me knowing. I felt completely betrayed. For months, I had been spilling my heart out to someone who wasn't even qualified to help, and Emma had been in on it the whole time. All those sessions where I felt attacked and manipulated suddenly made sense, because I was being manipulated. When I confronted Emma about how messed up this was, she broke down, saying she never meant to hurt me and that she just wanted to help us grow as a couple. But honestly, I don't know how to move past this. I haven't been able to look at her the same since. Now, Emma and her friends are saying I overreacted, that it was just a white lie meant to help our relationship. But I feel like I've been gaslit and lied to for months. So, am I the a-hole for blowing up at my girlfriend when I found out our therapist was a total fraud? Next story. Am I the a-hole for refusing to help get my stepdaughters to their newest extracurricular activity? My husband has 2 daughters, 13 and 12, with his ex-wife. They have been divorced for almost 11 years, and we have been married for 7 years and share 2 kids together ages 6 and 3. His ex-wife is not currently remarried, but she did marry twice since the divorce and has 2 additional children ages 9 and 5. The co-parenting relationship is very unstable and changeable. Some decisions need to be made via mediation. Others they can agree on to a point, while a few were taken to court for a judge to decide for them. My relationship with my stepdaughters was good until 3 years ago when their mom's negativity changed how they treat me. They have expressed that they know their mom doesn't like me, so they won't like me anymore either. This has been discussed in court and in therapy, and nothing has changed. They continue to treat me differently than before. They don't get away with disrespect, but they still are way more than before, and they're colder with me in general. Now on to the issue where I want to know if I'm the a-hole. My husband and I are typically really good about communicating, and he is a supportive husband and father, and has done a good job of keeping me out of his ex-wife's way so she can't say crap to me, and also standing up for me. I don't join them for talks about the girls. That's him and his ex, but my husband and I will discuss it. A few months ago, the girls said they wanted to take new dance classes 50 minutes from our home. They already do ballet, dancing for fun, which is free, and gymnastics. But these dance classes are different. They're also more expensive than the other extracurriculars they do. I told my husband I thought the new dance classes were too far and too expensive, and I said they would not work with the schedule we already have. But when he and his ex sat down to discuss it, he agreed to these new dance classes, which he and his ex will split 50-50. When he told me, I wasn't thrilled, because he didn't tell me he was going to agree to them. But I know it's not my decision. But I told him I could not, and would not help get the girls there. He told me we'd figure something out. The girls were back with us 2 days after this talk, and they said their mom told them I didn't want them to do these dance classes, and sucks to be me because I don't have a say because I'm not their parent. My husband told them not to speak to me like that. He was unable to get his parents to take the girls to the new classes, so he wanted me to do it. I put my foot down and said no. He said he couldn't because he had to work. I told him I had to drop our 6-year-old off at his extracurricular that day, and it would not work with time. My husband asked his ex if she'd bring them every week, and she's saying I'm such an a-hole for not driving them, and how dare I think I get any say in this. I need to do what the kids want and stay out of their way otherwise. Am I the a-hole?